The wedding hall glittered under golden chandeliers, and the soft fragrance of fresh roses drifted through the air. Guests whispered in admiration as the bride appeared at the entrance, her white gown trailing behind her like a river of silk. Cameras flashed, music swelled, and all eyes followed her slow walk down the aisle. She smiled, the perfect smile of a perfect bride. To everyone watching, she was the image of happiness. But inside, her heart was silent, heavy, cold. Each step toward the man waiting at the altar felt like a step into a life she didn't want. She told herself to keep walking, to keep smiling, because this day wasn't about her heart. It was about appearances, family expectations, and a decision she had made out of fear rather than love. The groom stood tall, his face glowing with hope and pride. His eyes followed her with a love so pure that it almost hurt to meet his gaze. He saw only his dream coming true. He didn't see the emptiness behind her eyes, the hesitation hidden beneath her calm steps. As she reached the altar, the priest's voice filled the hall, speaking of love, commitment, and a sacred bond meant to last a lifetime. She heard the words, but they felt distant, like an echo from a world she wasn't part of. Then came the moment. "Do you take this man to be your lawful husband?" Her chest tightened. There was a heartbeat of silence, a pause so short that no one else noticed. Her lips curved into a practiced smile. "I do," she whispered. Applause erupted. The hall filled with cheers. Cameras clicked, capturing the moment the world thought was filled with love. But in her chest, those words were empty. The day passed like a perfectly choreographed performance. She laughed when expected, posed for pictures, and let her new husband feed her a piece of cake as guests cheered. Every move was a scene in the play of a happy bride. When the celebration ended and the house grew quiet, the reality she had buried all day rose like a shadow. She sat alone by the bedroom window, still in her wedding dress, staring at the moon. Her husband was in the next room, excitedly talking about their future, their home, their trips, his voice full of dreams he believed they shared. She listened, but her heart was elsewhere. It wandered to the life she had wanted, to the person she had imagined standing beside her on a day like this. Her chest ached with a truth she couldn't speak. She didn't love the man who loved her. Weeks passed, and her life became a routine of beautiful lies. She smiled at neighbors, thanked relatives for their blessings, and played the role of the devoted wife. To the world, her life was perfect. But every time she looked in the mirror, she saw the truth in her own eyes. Her husband adored her. He brought her flowers, left her little notes, and kissed her forehead every morning. His love was endless, but it couldn't melt the ice in her chest. Her heart refused to open, and she didn't know if it ever would. One evening, he surprised her with a candlelight dinner. The room glowed with soft light as he held her hand and said, "I've never been this happy in my life. I hope you feel the same." For a fleeting second, she wanted to tell the truth, to admit that she had said, "I do," with her lips but not with her heart. But fear and guilt silenced her. She smiled instead and said softly, "Me too." He believed her. Of course he did. His love was blind, and her performance flawless. One rainy night, she found herself awake, listening to the soft rhythm of raindrops against the window. Her husband slept peacefully beside her, dreaming of the life he thought they shared. She stared at the ceiling, her chest tight with the weight of the secret she carried. "I never meant it," she whispered to the darkness. The day she said, "I do," was the day she locked herself into a life built on a lie. To the world, she was the perfect bride. To her husband, she was the woman of his dreams. But inside, she was a prisoner of her own choice, haunted by two small words she had never truly meant. The wedding hall was alive with celebration. Golden lights reflected off the crystal chandeliers, and the soft notes of a piano filled the air. Guests murmured in admiration as the bride stepped into the aisle, her white gown flowing like a gentle wave. Cameras flashed, capturing a moment the world saw as pure happiness. She smiled, because that's what everyone expected from a bride. But deep down, her heart was miles away. She had said yes to this marriage, but not for love. Family pressure had cornered her, relatives whispering that she was of age and could not refuse such a stable match. There was also the security this marriage promised, financial comfort, a future free from struggle. And, hidden in the deepest corner of her heart, was a secret plan she could never admit. This union wasn't built on love, it was built on necessity and survival. As she walked down the aisle, her thoughts betrayed her. They didn't stay in the hall. They drifted to someone else, the one she had once dreamed of marrying, the one she had let go because life had demanded sacrifice. She could almost feel his hand in hers, almost hear his laughter. But when her eyes met the groom's at the altar, reality returned like a heavy weight on her chest. His face was full of joy, his eyes sparkling with a love that she didn't share. He believed this was the beginning of a beautiful life. She knew it was only the start of a quiet performance. The ceremony began, the priest's voice echoing through the hall. He spoke of love, faithfulness, and devotion. Each word pressed against her heart, like a reminder of the lies she was living. "Do you take this man to be your husband?" She hesitated for the briefest moment. Her chest tightened. Her mind screamed for freedom. But then she smiled for the cameras, for her family, for the world. "I do," she whispered. The crowd erupted in cheers, the music swelled, and the groom's face lit up with pure joy. No one knew that the words she had spoken were hollow, that her heart was somewhere else entirely. Throughout the reception, she played her role perfectly. She laughed when people told jokes, posed for photos, and let her new husband feed her cake while guests applauded. Her relatives hugged her tightly, whispering blessings and praises for the happy couple. But every smile was a mask. Inside, she was drowning. That night, the celebrations ended, and she found herself alone in the quiet of their new bedroom. Her husband spoke excitedly about their future, trips they would take, the house they would decorate, the life he imagined they would share. She nodded, forcing herself to respond, but her thoughts kept wandering to the life she wished she had chosen. In that life, she was free. She had followed her heart, not the weight of expectation. In that life, she didn't feel like an actress in her own story. Days turned into weeks, and her routine as a wife began. She woke early, managed the home, and smiled at neighbors who congratulated her on her happy marriage. The world saw perfection. She saw a prison she had built with her own silence. Her husband's love was steady, blind, and complete. He brought her flowers, whispered promises, and looked at her like she was his entire world. And every time she saw that devotion in his eyes, a pang of guilt pierced her chest. He deserved someone who loved him back. One evening, as he held her hand and said, "I'll always keep you happy," she forced a smile that almost trembled. Inside, her heart whispered the truth. "You can give me the world, but not the life I wanted." One night, she couldn't sleep. She lay beside him, his arm around her, and stared at the ceiling. Her mind drifted to the person she truly loved, the path she had abandoned, the freedom she had traded for security. Her chest tightened, and tears formed in her eyes. In the quiet darkness, she whispered to herself, "I'm living a life that isn't mine." The wedding had been beautiful. The photographs showed a radiant bride, a joyful groom, and a family celebrating a perfect union. But beneath the surface, the truth was simple. She had married for reasons she couldn't confess. Her mind had never been at that altar. And the "I do" she had spoken would haunt her for the rest of her life. He woke up every morning with a smile, believing he was the luckiest man alive. Beside him slept the woman he loved with his whole heart, the woman he had promised to protect and cherish for the rest of his life. He turned quietly to watch her, brushing a stray hair from her face. In that soft light of dawn, she looked like the answer to every prayer he had ever whispered. To him, life was perfect. She was his wife, his world, his dream come true. And in his blind love, he never doubted for a second that she felt the same. He poured his love into every small act. He made her tea in the mornings, left handwritten notes on the kitchen counter, and brought her flowers on random evenings. Sometimes, he would come home with her favorite dessert just to see her smile. When he looked into her eyes, he saw the life he had always wanted, a home filled with love, laughter, and trust. But sometimes, in quiet moments, he noticed things. Her smile would flicker, just for a heartbeat. Her eyes would drift to the window when he spoke about their future. At night, she sometimes lay awake staring at the ceiling, pretending to sleep when he turned toward her. He saw it. He felt it. But he refused to believe it. "She's just tired," he told himself. "She needs time. Love will grow." And so, he buried every doubt under the weight of his devotion. One evening, he planned a surprise. He came home early, the smell of fresh roses filling the hallway. In the living room, a small table was set with candles and her favorite meal. He had even placed a delicate necklace in a tiny box, hoping to see her eyes light up the way they used to. When she walked in, he smiled like a boy in love for the first time. "Close your eyes," he said, guiding her to the table. She obeyed, her lips curving into a polite smile. "Open them," he whispered. Her eyes landed on the flowers, the candles, the food, the little box. For a moment, she hesitated, then smiled and whispered, "Thank you." It was the smile he wanted, but something about it was fragile, like glass. He didn't question it. He couldn't. His heart wanted to believe that she was happy, that this love was real for both of them. Weeks passed, and the little signs grew louder. She spent more time on her phone, more time in her thoughts. She avoided long conversations, often claiming she was tired. When he tried to hold her hand, she let him, but her fingers didn't curl around his the way they used to. One night, as rain tapped against the window, he asked softly, "Are you happy with me?" She hesitated, just for a moment. Then she smiled, that practiced, perfect smile. "Of course I am." His heart swelled with relief. He kissed her hand and whispered, "I'll give you the world, I promise." And in that moment, he believed it again. He believed that love could fix everything, that his devotion was enough for the both of them. He never saw the shadow in her eyes, the distance in her heart. Love can be a beautiful light, but for him, it was also a blindfold. He noticed the silences. He noticed the late-night sighs, the distant stares, the way she sometimes flinched when he surprised her with affection. But he told himself stories to protect his heart. "She's adjusting. She's shy. She loves me. How could she not?" He was a man in love, and love made him deaf to the truth that whispered through the walls of their home. One evening, he found her sitting by the window, lost in thought. The sunset painted her face in soft gold. He walked over, wrapped his arms around her, and rested his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked gently. She paused. "Nothing, just the sky." He smiled, kissed her hair, and whispered, "As long as I'm with you, my sky is always clear." She smiled again, soft and distant. He didn't notice the tear. She quickly blinked away. He lived in a world of his own making, a world where his love was enough to blind him to her silence. He didn't see that her heart was somewhere else. He didn't hear the quiet screams of distance between them. To him, she was his everything. To her, he was a kind man living in a story she couldn't feel. And still, he loved her with a love so pure that it refused to see the cracks in its reflection. The house was quiet, but her heart was not. In the darkness of the bedroom, she lay still, her husband's arm draped across her like a promise she never asked for. His soft breathing filled the room, steady and peaceful. To him, this was love. To her, it felt like a chain. Under her pillow lay a secret she guarded with her life, a small diary with a fading leather cover. Inside it were memories of a world she could never return to, pages filled with handwriting that carried both joy and heartbreak. Words of love once exchanged, dreams she once held, and a life she had been forced to leave behind. Some nights, when the weight of silence became unbearable, she would slip out of bed and sit by the window. The moonlight spilled across the pages as she opened the diary and drifted back into the past. She remembered his face, the man she had truly loved. His laughter had once been her favorite song, his presence her safe place. In those moments, she felt alive. But that love had ended, not by choice but by the heavy hands of life. Her family said he wasn't suitable, that he couldn't give her the life she deserved. She had cried, begged, and resisted, but in the end, she had given in. She said yes to a different man, the one now sleeping beside her, because it was easier to surrender than to fight. During the day, she wore the mask of a dutiful wife. She smiled at neighbors, thanked relatives for their blessings, and let her husband believe that her heart was his. But when night came, the mask slipped, and the truth whispered through the walls of her heart. Her phone held another secret. Hidden deep in its gallery were old messages and photos she could never bring herself to delete. Sometimes, she scrolled through them in the bathroom with the door locked, her chest tightening as she relived a life that felt both near and impossibly far. One message still haunted her. "If you ever change your mind, I'll still be waiting." She had read it 100 times. She had never replied. Beside her, her husband loved blindly. He noticed her distant stares, the way she sometimes froze when he held her hand, the way her smiles never fully reached her eyes. But he didn't question it. He trusted her heart because his own love was too deep to imagine betrayal, not the kind that involved another person, but the quiet betrayal of a heart that was never his. One evening, he surprised her with a gentle kiss and whispered, "You're my whole world." Her chest tightened. She wanted to say something, anything, but words tangled in her throat. She only smiled, nodded, and went back to cooking, while inside, her guilt grew heavier. That night, as rain tapped softly on the window, she lay awake staring at the ceiling. The man beside her shifted in his sleep, murmuring her name. She turned to face him for a moment, watching the peaceful rise and fall of his chest. He looked so innocent, so sure of a love that had never truly existed. Her heart whispered what her lips never could, "I don't belong here." Her mind drifted to the life she had wanted. The small apartment with peeling paint, the cheap takeout dinners, the laughter that filled empty rooms. It wasn't the life her family wanted for her, but it was the life where her heart had been free. She closed her eyes and clutched her diary under the pillow. In that secret world, she could still be herself. In those pages, she was still the girl who had loved without fear, who had believed in forever. But reality always returned with the morning light. She would wake to the smell of her husband's tea, to his hopeful smile, and to the life she had chosen but never wanted. Her secret would remain hidden, inside the diary, inside the old messages, and deep within her chest. And every night, as she lay beside the man who loved her more than life itself, she would close her eyes and drift into dreams of another world, the world where her heart had truly belonged. The evening air was quiet, broken only by the soft clinking of dishes as he set the dinner table. He had spent the afternoon preparing her favorite meal, imagining the smile it would bring to her face. Love made him believe that little gestures could keep their world perfect. She walked in late, her heels clicking against the tiled floor. Her hair was slightly messy, and her eyes carried a strange flicker, something between guilt and exhaustion. "You're late," he said gently, his tone more curious than accusatory. "There was a delay at the market," she replied quickly, placing her handbag on the counter. Her voice was calm, but her eyes didn't meet his. He smiled anyway, trying to push the unease aside. "Come, dinner's ready." She nodded, washing her hands and joining him at the table. They ate in silence, broken only by the occasional clatter of cutlery. He tried to fill the room with light conversation, but her answers were short, distracted. It was as if her body was there, but her mind was somewhere else entirely. That night, as he tidied the living room, her phone buzzed on the couch. A single message lit up the screen before fading. His eyes caught just one word: soon. He froze for a moment, staring at the phone. A small chill ran through him, but he quickly shook his head. No, he thought. I trust her. I won't doubt her. When she returned from the shower, he smiled and handed her the phone. Your phone buzzed. She blinked, just a fraction too long, then forced a casual tone. "Oh, just a friend." She locked the screen quickly, sliding it into her pocket. In the days that followed, small things began to unravel. She started receiving more phone calls in other rooms, her voice hushed. Sometimes she claimed she was going out for errands, but came back hours later without shopping bags. He asked gentle questions, but she always had answers, simple, believable, but just slightly off. The first real crack came one evening while they sat on the porch. She was scrolling through her phone, lost in her own world, when he said, "You seem distant lately. Is everything okay?" She startled slightly, then laughed nervously. "I'm fine. You're imagining things." But the laugh felt forced. And for the first time, his heart felt heavy with doubt. The turning point came with a phone call. It was late, nearly midnight, when her phone rang on the nightstand. He glanced at the screen. An unknown number. She grabbed it quickly and stepped out of the room, her voice low but sharp through the thin walls. He caught fragments of the conversation. "I said I can't talk now. Don't call me like this." He sat on the bed, frozen, his heart pounding. A shadow of fear crept into his chest, twisting his love into unease. When she returned, her face was calm, too calm. "Just a wrong number," she said lightly. He nodded slowly, forcing a smile. He wanted to believe her. He always wanted to believe her. But something deep inside whispered that this was the first sign, the first ripple in the calm surface of his blind love. That night, sleep escaped him. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment in his mind. The late arrivals, the distant eyes, the secretive phone calls. He thought of the way her smile had changed, how it no longer reached her eyes. He told himself he was overthinking. He told himself that love meant trust. But another part of him, the part he had tried to silence, began to ask dangerous questions. Where does she really go? Who is on the phone? What is she hiding from me? The next day, he left for work with a heavy heart. He kissed her goodbye, the way he always did, but she seemed distracted, her mind elsewhere. He lingered at the door for a moment, studying her face. "Everything okay?" he asked softly. "Yes, of course," she said, forcing another smile. And as he walked away, the truth he didn't want to face settled quietly in his chest. Something wasn't right. To the world, she was the perfect wife. Neighbors admired the couple walking together in the evenings. Relatives praised her for her grace and kindness, and her husband glowed with pride whenever someone complimented their happy marriage. But behind that carefully painted picture was a secret she guarded fiercely. Her marriage was a mask. Her smiles, her laughter, her gentle touches, all were part of a performance that kept the world from seeing the truth. Beneath the surface, her heart was living a double life. During the day, she played her role flawlessly. She made breakfast while her husband prepared for work, kissed him goodbye at the door, and waved until he disappeared down the street. Then, the performance ended. The moment the door closed, she exhaled as if shedding a heavy costume. Her eyes drifted to her phone. Within minutes, a message would arrive. "Are you free today?" Her pulse quickened. It was the same number that had lit up her phone late at night, the one she always labeled under a false name. She typed a quick reply with trembling fingers. "Yes." 2 hours. By the time her husband was at his office, she was slipping into a different world. Sometimes it was a discreet cafe across town. Other times, a quiet park where no one knew her face. There, she wasn't the loyal wife or the perfect bride. She was the woman she had been before the wedding. A woman with desires, regrets, and a heart that refused to stay where it didn't belong. Her husband never suspected a thing. He was blinded by love and trust. Every evening, he came home to a spotless house and a smiling wife. He shared stories from work, his dreams for their future, and promises of the life he wanted to build for them. She nodded, listened, and played along. All the while, her phone stayed face down on the counter, hiding messages that would shatter his world if he ever saw them. Sometimes, she felt a flicker of guilt when he surprised her with flowers or kissed her forehead gently. But that guilt was fleeting. She had built her life on choices she couldn't undo, and now she lived between two worlds, the one people admired and the one they could never know. One evening, after a quiet dinner, she excused herself to the bedroom. She sat on the bed, scrolling through the messages that had become her lifeline. "I miss you. When will you leave him?" Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, her chest tightening. She couldn't answer that question. Her life had become a carefully balanced lie, and she wasn't ready to face the cost of truth. She quickly deleted the messages as she always did, leaving no trace of her double life. Then she returned to the living room, where her husband was watching television, completely unaware that the woman he loved had just erased another piece of her secret world. At family gatherings, she wore her mask perfectly. She held his hand, smiled for photos, and listened as relatives said, "Mashallah, what a beautiful couple." No one knew that while she stood beside her husband, part of her heart was miles away with someone else. But living two lives takes its toll. At night, when the world was silent, she lay beside her husband and stared at the ceiling. The weight of her choices pressed on her chest. She thought of the promises she had broken silently, the life she was pretending to live, and the path that could only end in heartbreak. One rainy night, as thunder rolled outside, she received a message while her husband slept. The phone buzzed softly under her pillow. "I can't keep waiting forever." She froze, staring at the screen in the dim light. Her double life was slowly collapsing. She had built a fragile world of lies, and every new message was a crack in the walls she had tried to keep standing. Beside her, her husband murmured her name in his sleep, his hand reaching for hers. She let him hold it, staring into the darkness, caught between two worlds she could never truly have. Her marriage was a mask. Her love belonged elsewhere. And every passing day, the secret life she carried grew heavier, threatening to destroy the perfect image everyone else believed in. The morning began like any other. Sunlight spilled softly into their bedroom, and the smell of tea drifted from the kitchen. He stretched, smiled, and reached for his phone to check the time. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand beside him. At first, he didn't mean to look. He trusted her, he always had. But the screen lit up, and the words appeared in bold, impossible to ignore. "I miss you. Last night was perfect." For a moment, he couldn't breathe. The world seemed to tilt, his heart pounding in his ears. He stared at the message, reading it again and again, hoping he had misunderstood. But the truth was clear. His hands trembled as he set the phone back down, careful not to make a sound. His chest felt hollow, a cold wave of disbelief washing over him. The woman he had loved, the one he had given his whole heart to, was living a lie. When she entered the room with a tray of breakfast, her smile was warm, perfect, practiced. "Good morning," she said cheerfully, placing the tray on the bed. He forced a smile, his voice tight. "Good morning." She didn't notice his shaking hands or the way his eyes lingered on her phone. She poured him tea, talking about plans for the day, completely unaware that the fragile wall of his blind love had finally cracked. Every word she spoke felt like a betrayal now. Every smile, every touch, every "I love you" replayed in his mind with a bitter twist. Later that day, while she was in the shower, he opened her phone with trembling fingers. The guilt stung, but the need to know burned stronger. The messages were all there, carefully hidden in a folder under a false name. Words of longing, promises of secret meetings, and photographs he wished he could unsee. One picture in particular made his stomach twist, her smiling in a cafe, a happiness he hadn't seen in their home for months. His chest ached as he scrolled through the proof of a love that wasn't his. Her "I do" had been nothing more than a performance, a script she had recited while her heart belonged to someone else. When she came out of the bathroom, humming softly, he was sitting on the edge of the bed, silent, her phone in his hands. Her humming stopped. The color drained from her face. "Where were you?" he asked quietly, his voice trembling not with anger, but with heartbreak. I went shopping," she whispered, her voice weak. He turned the screen toward her. "Then why does it say you were here with him?" Her lips parted, but no words came. The silence between them was louder than any confession. Tears welled in his eyes as he stood, pacing the room, the weight of betrayal pressing down on him like a storm. "I loved you," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I gave you everything. I believed every word you said." And all this time, he trailed off, choking on the truth that had finally surfaced. The house felt different now, cold, suffocating. The walls that had once held laughter and dreams now trapped the echoes of lies. He walked through each room slowly, memories flashing in his mind. The nights he had stayed up planning surprises for her, the mornings he had kissed her forehead before leaving for work, the way he had defended her whenever anyone doubted her distant smiles. It all felt like a cruel joke. That night, he didn't sleep. He sat by the window, staring out at the quiet street, the city lights blurring through his tears. His mind replayed the moment he first saw her walking down the aisle, radiant and smiling. He remembered how his heart had swelled when she said, "I do." Now he understood the truth. Those words had been a lie that had built his entire world, only to shatter it in a single day. When she approached him cautiously, her voice soft and trembling, he didn't turn to look at her. I never wanted to hurt you," she whispered. He laughed bitterly, a sound more like a broken sigh. "You didn't just hurt me. You destroyed everything I believed in." She reached out a hand, but he stepped back. The warmth he had once felt for her was now buried under a mountain of pain and disbelief. In that moment, the man who had loved the house that once felt like a home was now a hollow shell. Every corner whispered memories of a love that had never truly existed. He sat alone in the living room, the glow of the evening sun casting long shadows on the floor. On the coffee table lay the remnants of his shattered life, her wedding photograph, the phone with messages he could never unread, and the ring he had once slipped onto her finger with trembling joy. His hands were steady now. The storm of shock and disbelief had passed, leaving behind a cold, heavy clarity. She had never loved him, and he had built his world on an illusion. Upstairs, she packed her things in silence. Her movements were careful, almost graceful, but there was no escaping the weight of her choices. She could hear the emptiness in the house, the absence of the love she had taken for granted. Every drawer she opened, every piece of clothing she folded, felt like a quiet acknowledgement of what she was losing. She paused by the window, looking out at the quiet street. The neighbors who once smiled at the perfect couple would soon see the truth. They would talk. They would whisper. And in those whispers, she would feel the sting of her own deception. He climbed the stairs slowly, each step heavier than the last, and stopped at the bedroom door. She turned, startled, a shirt clutched in her hand. For a moment, they just stared at each other. "This is it," he said quietly. His voice wasn't angry. It was tired, worn down by heartbreak. "This is the breaking point." She looked down, unable to meet his eyes. I never meant for it to end like this." He gave a bitter laugh. "You never meant for it to end, period. You wanted me to stay blind forever. But I see you now. I see everything." He walked to the closet and pulled out her empty suitcase, setting it on the bed. "Take what you need," he said, "but leave the lies behind. I've had enough of those." Her hands shook as she zipped the bag. In her chest, fear and regret twisted together. For the first time, she felt the weight of the life she had destroyed, not just his, but her own. The man who had once looked at her with unwavering love now looked at her like a stranger, and she realized there was no going back. The evening air was cold when she stepped outside with her suitcase. No neighbors were around to see her leave, but in her mind, she could already hear their whispers. She would return to her parents, to questions and judgment, to a life where her betrayal would follow her like a shadow. He stood in the doorway, watching her go. There were no more words left to say. The ring still lay on the coffee table inside, a silent symbol of love given freely and wasted completely. As she reached the end of the driveway, she hesitated, glancing back one last time. He didn't move. His face was calm, but his eyes carried the finality of a man who had reached the end of love. When the car that picked her up disappeared into the distance, he closed the door and leaned against it, letting out a long, trembling breath. The silence of the house was deafening, but it was an honest silence now. No more lies, no more masks. He walked to the living room and picked up the wedding photograph. In the picture, she smiled brightly, and he stared at her like she was the center of his world. He traced the frame with his fingers, then set it face down on the table. That chapter of his life was over. That night, he slept alone for the first time in months, but his sleep was deep and undisturbed. His heart still ached, but the chains of blind love had finally broken. He had reached the breaking point, and survived it. Somewhere across town, she sat in a dim room, surrounded by her packed bags and her thoughts. Her phone was silent. The messages that once thrilled her now felt empty. The man she had betrayed had moved on without her, and the one she had risked everything for had vanished into the shadows of her bad choices. Her deception had cost her everything: her marriage, her home, and the one person who had loved her without question. In the end, betrayal doesn't just break hearts. It leaves you alone with the echo of your own lies. Blindly finally saw the truth with open eyes. And nothing in the world could put the pieces of his heart back together again. Months had passed since the night she left, but the echoes of her betrayal still lingered in the quiet spaces of his home. The walls no longer held the laughter he once imagined. The rooms no longer smelled of her perfume, and the bed where he once dreamed of forever now felt like a place of rebirth rather than loss. At first, the days had been unbearable. He woke to silence and found himself staring at the empty side of the bed, a reminder of the love he had poured into someone who never truly wanted it. But pain, like a storm, does not stay forever. Slowly, he learned to rebuild. He began with small steps: morning walks, cooking meals for himself, calling old friends he had neglected in the haze of his blind devotion. Each step was a piece of himself returning, a fragment of the man he had been before love turned into a prison. One evening, he stood by the window with a cup of tea, watching the sunset. The world outside seemed alive again, and for the first time, he felt free. Heartbroken, yes, but wiser in ways he wished he had never needed to be. He understood now that love was not just about giving, it was about giving to someone who truly wanted to receive it. His blind love had been pure, but it had been wasted on a heart that was never his. Across town, she lived in a small rented room, her life reduced to the fragments she had carried away in a suitcase. The world she had chosen over her marriage was not what she had imagined. The man she had risked everything for had drifted away once the excitement faded, leaving her to face the emptiness she had created. Friends avoided her, whispers followed her, and nights were the hardest. Sometimes, she would sit in the dark, scrolling through old photos, her wedding day, the smiles, the life she could have had if she had chosen honesty over deceit. For the first time, she felt the true weight of her choices. She had broken a man who loved her without question, and in the end, she had destroyed herself, too. He saw her once, by chance, at a market. Their eyes met briefly. She hesitated, as if she wanted to speak, but he only gave a polite nod and walked away. There was no anger in his eyes now. Only distance, only peace. That was when she understood the final, unspoken truth. She no longer had any place in his life, nor in the heart she had once taken for granted. He moved on, slowly but steadily. Life taught him that pain is a teacher and betrayal a brutal lesson. He became careful with his trust, but not bitter, wiser, but not closed off to the idea of love. Every evening, he would journal, reflecting on the life he had lived and the one he was building now. On the last page of his notebook, he wrote the lesson that had reshaped his soul. Never give your heart to someone who only wants your name. And never say, "I do," unless your heart truly does. Meanwhile, she faced a life of echoes, memories of what she had lost, and the haunting silence of the love she never gave. Her betrayal had left her isolated, her freedom nothing but an empty room and a phone that rarely rang. She would think of the man who once looked at her like she was his entire world, the man she could have loved if she had only chosen honesty over convenience. But regret is a prison that offers no escape. In the end, the story of their marriage became a quiet warning. He found peace in letting go, and she found despair in the ruins of her choices. Because saying "I do" without meaning it doesn't just destroy a marriage, it shatters hearts, lives, and the very soul of the one who speaks it with an empty heart.